feminine wisdom that reminds us of our infinity, our divinity.
Welcome back to the Soul Nectar podcast. It has been a hot minute since I recorded my last episode, to be specific, 2.5 years. Wow. So Soul Naked is now called Soul Nectar. It's my third rebrand of this podcast. When I started it 5 years ago in Bali, it was called Living Free, and it was all about breaking free of the own limitations of societal conditioning, of pain, of healing. It was all about living free. And then I went so many layers deeper when I moved to Morea, and I went through several rebirths, and I knew it had to be soul naked. This was when I stripped myself bare, my human, my fears, my conditioning, my limitations, everything that was limiting my soul from reaching its full potential. And obviously it's a lifelong journey, but I have become such a different person in this journey of Soul Naked, and I have interviewed so many women literally naked on the show until 2.5 years ago. I went through the deepest initiation of my life, and I had to literally strip myself naked and let everything go that was attached to my identity. And I've shared the beginnings in the podcast until the level of initiation was too intense, and I was really asked to focus on myself. There was no capacity to hold space for anyone else to even share my process, because it was so intense, and everything in my life got stripped away. From my health, that's when I was told to die, and I had a surgery. I had a wrong diagnosis in Mexico, where a doctor has told me that a knot on my throat that was growing was a tumor, and that the surgery will be life-risking. And I had this full experience of surrendering to death until I decided that this is not my path, and that I'm gonna be thriving on the other side of this. Simultaneously of my health collapsing, my life collapsing, my soul told me in the deepest, darkest night of my soul, where I was uncovering a lot of ancestral patterns and hidden secrets in my lineage, that I have to let everything go and burn everything to the ground. It was at the peak of my business. I was not only mentoring women one-on-one, guiding retreats around the world, especially in Morea with the whales. I was training women to become feminine embodiment leaders. I had a weekly podcast on this show. I did online programs, so many things that I really loved. I had a team of 4, and then my soul was like, nope, you gotta let everything go. And it felt so scary but true in the moment. And that's when I literally burned everything to the ground. I deleted everything I had ever created. Obviously the podcast is still online, but besides that, I deleted everything, and I jumped backwards into the mystery of not only living soul-led, but really trusting life and the divine and the mystery to hold me when I had no proof and no 5-step process to get there. It was like, you just gotta learn how to trust now. So I did, and it was such a journey, sometimes beautiful, sometimes terrifying. All of my deepest fears have been come to the surface. So much ancestral clearing about scarcity, abundance was cleared in this time. My womb has been cleared. I haven't been dating in 3 years. I haven't kissed or touched any man in 3 years. So this was all about really diving deep into the depth of my psyche to unravel every layer. Not every layer, and obviously this is a lifelong journey, but so many layers around my soul who were based on conditioning and fear, to really come to my essence. And that's why the name Soul Nectar came. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you can see my necklace, which is the essence of this whole process of the last few years, where we tap into our soul essence and we drip from that essence out into the world with containment, with the magic that comes from our soul, without the fear of what ripples it creates, with the deep trust within our soul that abundance is a frequency, and that once we stay in the frequency, we're always provided for. But once we tap into fear and worry, it will manifest in our outside world. That's what I've been really learning to embody, to come back again and again, that it's all based on frequency. And it doesn't feel real when you're in it and you're clearing ancestral trauma about scarcity, especially if you have war trauma in your lineage like I do, where people got everything stripped away within seconds and they were forced to live from nothing. My grandfather was living from potatoes for a whole year after the bomb attacked in Dresden. So I used to have it ingrained in my DNA to hold on, to not trust that there's always enough. And the last few years have really allowed me to dive deep within myself and to share the nectar that comes from my soul with you, to invite you with me on this journey that is really beyond anything society has ever told us, and to come home to the truth of who we are and why we came here in this wild time on planet Earth, to help the shift in frequency from a really grounded, embodied way. Because so many of us souls have chosen to be here in this time to help this shift of consciousness, the shift into the new Earth. And I feel it's really time for us to step into this role, but to not abandon our humanness along the journey. That has been my path, and that's the topic I want to share today: how to live a soul-led life where we can really bring home the soul into the body and to morph them into one, so that we can honor both our humanness, our nervous system, our beautiful body temples, but also the soul. Because what I have done in my journey, if you've been following me from the beginning, you know that I have been a school teacher deep in the system in Germany. I had a lifelong position working for the government. Nothing would have gotten me out of the system. I would have had a lifelong paid position with many advantages: private health insurance, a lot of holidays. I think it's the job with the most holidays on this planet. It allowed me to travel. It gave me a lot of safety. My grandparents were very proud of it. They got the certificate printed for their living room. But I just knew in my soul, even though my whole life I wanted to become a teacher for craft, handcraft and cooking. It was always my dream. In primary school I already knew I can do this better than my school teacher. And I was studying for 6 years and I finally was ready. And the day I started working in school, I noticed, oops, I actually feel very drained. Even though in theory it was my dream job, it did not make me feel the way I thought it would. And even though I had so many holidays to travel, after some point my body was so overstimulated and so burned out that I was trying to force myself to survive from school holiday to school holiday to make it to my sabbatical, which would have been 1 year later. So if I would have had the capacity to continue for 1 year, I would have had 1 year paid off from my job. And that was my plan, my cute little human plan, where I thought I'm gonna find the thing that I love that makes me be able to survive financially, to do my own thing. At this point I had already opened a yoga studio with my ex that ended not quite as I intended to, but that's a topic for another episode. And I thought, I tried it, I failed, it didn't work. Maybe I'm not meant to do something else. Maybe that's my destiny, that I'm just a school teacher. But deep in my soul, I felt that I'm here for something else, for something bigger, for something that impacts people that I'm meant to impact. And I had an impact on the kids in school, obviously, but I knew these weren't my people I was supposed to impact. So when I was watching the clock, counting the seconds until the school is over, until I can go on holiday again and traveling, because that's where I felt more free and more expressed and more me, where I could finally breathe, I heard very obviously this knocking of my soul, and especially in winter. If you live anywhere close to Germany, you know that winters get very cold, and even as a child I was not enjoying the cold. So my soul was like, what the fuck are you doing here? I've told you for years this is not your path, why are you still here? And my fear was immediately responding and getting tense and saying, well, what else should I do? There's nothing I'm trained in. I'm literally terrified of ending homeless. I would leave immediately if I knew how. And that's the thing about living a soul-led life. You won't get the answers before you leave the safety, the comfort, the knowing. And I think that's what terrified me the most, because I could feel the uncertainty that's about to come. I felt the hovering in the air, the not knowing, the surrendering to the mystery that felt so terrifying. I was not a person who was naturally good at that. I had to learn it, to train it like a muscle to be able to live this life. And I remember this Friday afternoon when I came home from school, and I had just joined a retreat in Aruba that was all about healing the heart, and it was very trauma-based and a lot of somatic work and catharsis and deep healing work. And I thought, I'm going to join so I feel rejuvenated and I go back and I can continue this year until my sabbatical starts. And I remember I came home from school after 1 week later, after that retreat, and I dropped my bag. I couldn't even close my door. And I fell on my knees and I just started sobbing uncontrollably for, I don't know how long I was there. It felt like an hour or even more. I could hardly breathe, and I finally let myself melt the tension, the armor that I had built up to convince myself that this was my dream job and that everything's fine when it was not. Because my body was talking to me. My body was telling me, this is not your path. You have to trust, you have to jump. But I was so afraid that it felt like I'm clinging onto a cliff with bleeding hands, and it's like one finger's left holding on and the rest is already about to drop, but I can't let go. It felt terrifying in my body. But then in this moment, my soul spoke very clear and told me that this is the last day you have ever seen this school building. You will leave the system. You will walk a completely unwalked path. You will inspire and help so many people that every person you touch will ripple into the field. And I was like, what are you talking about? I can't even help myself. Like, how am I supposed to help other people? I'm a mess. Look at me. I can't even do anything anymore. At that point, I had been so noise sensitive that I couldn't even go to the streets, to a restaurant, and in the subway. I constantly had to be either in nature or at home. Every day when I came home from school, I was exhausted. Even if it finished at noon, I was on the couch horizontal until the evening. And still I was like, no, this is my path, it's safe. It gave me a monthly income, and I just couldn't be honest with myself how much of my life force I was draining into something I was not made for. And that's the thing with us highly sensitive women or people in general. We try to push through, we try to convince ourselves, and then the body at some point doesn't have another chance if you don't listen. So at that point I made a promise to myself. I said, okay, I'm gonna devote my life to my soul, because I've always been intuitive. I've always heard the connection with my soul, with my inner voice. Sometimes it came from a faraway place, sometimes it came from my heart. I always knew what I had to do, what was good for me. But because of so much trauma and conditioning, I stayed in relationships that were not healthy for me. Some of them even abusive. I stayed in situations like my job that was not good for me. And I listened to my grandparents who said, well, work has to be hard. It's supposed to be hard. We were working our whole lives. But I couldn't see that it was their trauma from war that made them say that. And instead of being able to see me in my burnout, they were constantly just asking when I'm going back to school, what's happening with my retirement. I felt so unseen and so alone on this path. There was not a single person who could understand me. And then I made the decision that even if my biggest fear, which was to enter homeless and not find a way to make this work financially, comes true, that I'd rather be a happy homeless person than to live this lie that I knew I've been living for a while. Even though it looked perfect on paper, even though so many people were admiring me and would have done anything for a position that gives you so much freedom and time. But I just knew in my soul this is not my path, not my country, not my friends, not my family. Everything needed to change, but it felt so big and scary in that moment. But somehow I found the courage and I let go of everything. And at that point I had already received visions of Morea. I just didn't know back then that it was Morea. I had been chasing islands, white sand beaches, turquoise water, which was the exact visual I received in my visions. Sometimes when I was driving the bicycle to school and I was like, my life is great. This is awesome. I get paid for this. Like, I just work 5 hours and then I'm home. This is perfect. And then my soul was like, are you sure? And boom, these flashes came of turquoise water, white sand beach, and this longing for home. It brought me to tears every single time. This one time I was holding onto the traffic light, tears streaming down my face. And it was nothing anyone could understand. Everyone was like, you have to be grateful for what you have. This island doesn't exist. It's time to wake up and, just be grateful for what you have. And that made it even worse because I felt guilty that I wasn't grateful for the dream that I had created for myself. That felt so safe and at the same time like a prison for me because it wasn't my path. My soul was trying to escape and communicate with me, and for a long time I didn't listen. And then I made a decision. I was like, okay, I'm gonna devote my life to my soul no matter what. And it took me on a wild adventure. If you've been following my path, you know that I did find the islands of my vision, not through traveling, but through a Instagram story that a friend had sent me from Chelsea, Kauai, who was on Morea at that time. And I looked at the story. She was one of the only people who believed in my vision, the friend who had sent me the story. And I received the story and I dropped on my knees and I again cried uncontrollably, but this time not of pain, not of collapse. It was this deep inner knowing of my soul that this is home. This is the place I've been looking for my whole life. I had received these visions for 15 years, traveled to every island I could find, but I never found it. I was even doubting and believing people who said, maybe it doesn't exist. Maybe this is just a dream, an illusion that isn't out there. But some piece of my being knew it was there, a piece that had access to a future timeline. So when I received the story and I dropped on my knees for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone to understand. I didn't need anyone to approve of this. I just knew in my soul I have to move there. I didn't even need to travel there before. I didn't need to connect with anyone there. It was this deep inner knowing, this is my path. And my cute little human tried to make a story out of it and pretend it knows what's gonna happen. And I thought I had this romantic story in my mind, perfectly envisioned how I moved to this island and my bravery is rewarded and I'm gonna meet the man of my dreams and create this retreat center and live there for the rest of my life, raise my babies, and that's it. But it did not quite happen that way. When I gave up my life in Germany, so I quit everything, I gifted and sold everything I had owned, and it was a lot. I've always been an artist, so I created so much beauty that was so attached to so many versions of me and so many emotions and memories. I had to let go of everything, which was the hardest part, alongside saying goodbye to everyone. I quit my businesses, closed them, closed everything in Germany, said goodbye to everyone, and went to Morea, to the other side of the world, on a one-way ticket. I didn't know a single soul, I didn't have the money. I just knew in my soul I had to move there, and because I had lived the opposite of not listening to my soul, to devoting my life to it, that I had to learn the dance to bridge the both of following the soul, to stay in soul alignment, but also take my human, my nervous system alongside with it, because chances are that you are also a highly sensitive, intuitive, empathetic being. And it is so important that we nurture and nourish our human bodies, our nervous systems on this path of living a soul-led life. Because in the beginning, it was almost the opposite extreme of the pendulum. I was like, woo, let's follow the soul. I moved to Morea and I was sitting in the airplane literally thinking I had made the biggest mistake of my life. I thought, this is not going to work. And all of the fears that people were reflecting and projecting onto me when I shared my dream, because I shared it all publicly on the internet, on Instagram, in my yoga classes, and everyone was like, didn't really know how to react because it was such a big step. So it felt like everyone's throwing their fear codes onto me. And in the beginning I was like, no, thank you, this is your fear code, please keep it. In the end, I took on a lot of them because obviously my fear came up, and then it was just a mirror to the fear. And when I was sitting to the plane to Morea, which is the other side of the planet, I was terrified. My nervous system was collapsing. I was in so much terror. I needed to do EFT. While I'm on the airplane, I still, even though I might have done the biggest mistake of my life and just given up a really amazing life for nothing but a dream that might not work, and I might just end homeless, and my biggest fear becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, I still love and accept myself. So I was there doing all the EFT. Didn't help much, but there was no turning back. I was already in this airplane to Morea. And when I arrived there, it felt like the island embraced me and said, welcome home. And I cried happy tears when I saw the island for the first time, because I knew already how she felt like. It's where I've spent many lifetimes, where it feels like the closest to Lemuria, where I've spent times in a past life or parallel life as a leader. The purity of the land, the divine feminine primal nature of this land is nothing like I've ever experienced anywhere. And I've been traveling since I'm 1 year old. So I've seen many places on the planet, but Morea has a magic that's undescribable. It's 7 flight hours away from every mainland, so it holds a frequency that's so pure, so pristine, that I didn't have another chance but to remember who I am. So instead of having the romance of meeting, I met a man, it was not my man, but it wasn't a happy ever ending, story that I imagined. It was a 7-month deep, dark night of the soul, where every day felt like a year, where my human got stripped bare of so much trauma, so much pain, so much conditioning, so much ancestral stuff, collective stuff. Every day I went a layer deeper and deeper, and when I thought I'm already dead on the surface of the ocean, it felt like I'm being dragged under the surface of the ocean, and I didn't know how to handle this anymore. It was so intense. No no person I was connected to or trying to find was able to hold me in this process. I really had to go there while everything in my life got stripped away. I had a falling out with my best friend, and for the first time in my life, I didn't have any friend, basically. Everyone fell away in this journey, and I found myself alone on this island that I thought is going to be rewarded for my courage. It was a really dark, deep journey while being surrounded by the most pristine nature. It was such irony, but also what I needed, because otherwise I would have probably blamed it on the weather or something, but there was nothing to blame on the outside, so I needed to go really deep into myself. And there were moments where I thought I couldn't handle this anymore, any longer. Not a second, not a day. I was just praying that this has a good ending. I was keeping the faith in the deepest darkness that this is for my highest evolution, even though there was nothing in sight that would prove it. It would just get darker and deeper. I was faced with racism on the island, people threatening me, attacking me, my business crashing, facing all of my existential fear with money, with safety. I had someone trying to break into my bungalow. Like, all of my deepest fear was coming up and manifested on the outside, so it could be cleared off my field. So it was a very intense purification process. And then after 7 months, I was like, okay, I have no idea who I am anymore without this pain, without this conditioning. I was floating in the void. I had no clue what was mine anymore. Is this kindness really me? Is it just because I had all this pain? Like, I had no clue who I was anymore. And then I got this message, because I tried to figure it out in my mind. I was spiraling. I was like, okay, how can I survive on this island? I don't know. Everything I planned was crashing and nothing was working. I had several failed launches with 0 people signing up, and I was kind of dependent on it because I needed to survive on one of the most expensive islands on the planet. I didn't have a support system. I didn't have family who was there for me. It was like alone in the darkness. It was really intense. And then I went on a hike barefoot, like I used to do very often. And I remember thinking, okay, the only thing I haven't thought of is to pause everything, to go offline, and to not do anything. And my soul immediately was like, yes, that's the truth. That needs to happen. And my mind was like, that's like the last thing I want to do, because my podcast keeps me connected to my people. Like, there's at least a chance people book something. And I was like, oh my God, I hope this is not the truth. And I said, okay, I'm on the swing in Morea, swinging on this beautiful Dragon Mountain view. And I said, if this is true, send me a butterfly and a dragonfly now. Within, I'm not even kidding, 2 seconds, a dragonfly and a butterfly come really close in front of me. And I was like, fuck, I really need to do this. So it was the scariest thing in this moment. I had my last savings, but I had already agreed on moving out of my bungalow for a month, because when I rented my place long term, my landlord told me that his family is coming for a month, so he will need it. I was like, okay. So first time after 7 months not leaving the island, I booked a ticket to the Tuamotus, which is an island its atoll is even further. It's an hour flight from Tahiti. It's like stripy islands in a circle and nothing but ocean. So I spent 10 days on each atoll in Tikehau, Whakarava, and Rangiroa. And that's where everything really started, when I let go of control of how I thought this soul path will happen and what I need to do and who I need to be. And I allowed to let go of everything. I was like, for a whole month, I'm not going to tell anyone who I am, what I do. I'm not going to hold space for anyone. I'm not going to share anything. I'm just going to be present and see what life is presenting to me. And for the first atoll, there was no humans at all. I was on a private island on a tiny little shack on the beach with nothing but ocean in front of me. So there was nothing to distract from. I shut off my phone over my birthday. I just decided I'm gonna listen and sit in the discomfort. And it sounds dreamy to go to paradise islands by yourself if you're in a hectic, stressful life, but believe me, if you're in a dark night of the soul, it's really challenging. Time stretches. Every day felt like 20 years. And all of these parts that I usually had space and distractions to numb myself from suddenly were coming up to the surface. So even though I've had done so much healing and went so much into the depth of my being, into the darkness of who I am, there were so many parts that were coming up in this time. It was unbelievable. And normally I would play music, listen to a podcast, do whatever on YouTube, or stay connected to people on WhatsApp. But I didn't have my phone, I didn't have music. It was just me and the ocean, day in, day out. Time was stretching like crazy. So while I was bathing in my misery, really not in a good mental space, seeing, if I saw a boat, there was only honeymoon people and then just me alone on this island. And to stay sane, I had bought some jewelry, tools to make jewelry for myself. And the woman who owned the place gave me a handful of black pearls because she saw me making jewelry. And then I found a man on another atoll where I could drill them. So I would just make jewelry for myself to not go completely insane on this tiny little island. And then I went to another atoll and I was diving with thousands of sharks and dolphins and manta rays. And it was just, wow, such a deeply profound experience for me. And I was still in the same headspace, really craving connection, but using this time. Like, I knew I had to go inside. I knew I had to face these parts of myself I had been avoiding my whole life. All the neglected parts, all the painful parts, all the not good enough, not worthy, not belonging, outsider, alien, all the stories I had told myself were coming up to the surface. And then something miraculous happened as soon as I left this month, which was the first time I was in touch with humans again. And I remember on the taxi ride from the atoll to the airport, there was a woman from another hotel behind me, and I was sitting in the front, and she was like, "Oh, where did you get your earrings from?" And I was like, "I just made them naked on the island to not lose my sanity." And she's like, "Can I buy them?" And I was like, "Sure." And I opened my earrings and I gave them to her, unsure what to charge for it. And this is how it all started. I thought it's a coincidence. And then literally from left and right, as soon as I was out in the world again, women were just magnetized to me on airplanes, on the beach, in cafes, on the street, everywhere, left and right. Women were wanting to be adorned by me. And that's when this timeline opened. It wasn't that I created it, it was shown to me. The universe was like, "Oh my God, you're trying so hard in the wrong direction. You're trying to force, to create from survival. This is not who you are. Your essence, your gifts are actually your magic." And this is how it all started. But still, it was I was carrying so much ancestral stuff and so much fear and limitation of what's possible. I didn't even dare to dream that this was something I could do for a living. So I came back to Morea, I broke up with my boyfriend, and then I had this first rebirth of erupting energy. So I would lay in my bed and just have these energetic orgasms and downloads and like an eruption, like a volcano erupting after a really long death period. And then I got the nudge to go to Mexico. And that's how I came back to Tulum. I've already been there 10 years ago with a lover after I had just lost my yoga studio, and I signed up for this plant medicine retreat that has changed the trajectory of my life. Like, I can't even explain how much. At this point in time, I am not doing any plant medicine since 2 years already, because I really needed integration and grounding. And the intensity of these initiations in the last 2 years have been too much for me. It would have not been beneficial. I tried a few times and my body literally rejected it, told me I don't need it anymore. I can access these states without any medicine, and I need the purity in my field to not take them. So I went to Mexico, went to this retreat, did bufo ayahuasca, blasted my field wide open. I morphed with Source in a different galaxy. I was shown my mission, my purpose, why I always felt like I don't belong. And I always gave it this meaning of, how can I explain this? It always felt like I was experiencing this very mystical experience where I literally left my body and went into a different galaxy to morph with Source consciousness. And it was such a high voltage of light that my human body and nervous system, it was too much for it. It was like blasted open. And it took me 3 years to really get my energy back into my body, to ground. It's been a wild ride these last 3 years, because I feel I've been blasted open, and it showed me what happens if I don't close my field, because I couldn't always feel what other people are feeling. I could sense the energy shift in the room. I was always highly empathetic and intuitive and feeling, highly sensitive. But this just amplified everything, and I wasn't even able to stay in a room where one person had an immense purge or cathartic moment. I couldn't stay in a restaurant where people were drinking alcohol. I got so sensitive to the field around me that I really need to come back into my center and into my own energy to be able to exist on this planet. And from there, it just went so mystical and so led. So for a long time, I really devoted my life to follow my soul. And from Mexico, when I returned to Morea, which I really thought was the home for the rest of my life, the island, I had reached a level of sensitivity where my gift of telepathy opened. And suddenly the land and the plants and the water would communicate with me. And the land and the water was telling me, you're not supposed to be here anymore. Your time here is over. You're meant to share the magic this island gave you with the world. And I was like, what do you mean? I gave up my whole life. This is not a destination. This is not like a time period. I'm going to live here for the rest of my life. This is my home. I don't know who I am without this island anymore. And she was like, no, you're meant to go. And I was like, I don't even know how to be in the world anymore. I'm so sensitive now. I can't even be on an airplane. It's too much. And she said, you will find your way. And I didn't listen for a long time. For 8 months, I went traveling, cosmic, wild adventures around the planet, always following my soul, the intuitive nudges, what life presented to me. It was magical and adventurous, and also deep and dark and all the things. I really opened myself to experience it all. And in that year was the year where I returned to Mexico after the retreat. And this gigantic cyst was growing on my neck, which I talked about a little bit in the beginning. And the doctor told me I might die, and I had to surrender to death. And then at the same time, I revealed these deep, dark secrets of my family. And it was all too much. My body couldn't hold it. That was also the physical representation of all the deep, dark secrets that have been rushed under the rug. And almost every family has that. But because it was all uncovering at the same time, it was too much for my body to hold. And that's what I learned the hard way in that moment. And that's what I want to share through my experience with you. that if you live this soul-led life, don't do the extreme way like I did, swinging from one pendulum side to the other one, where you almost abandon your human and you're like, woo, I just follow my soul now. But to really honor your nervous system, and sometimes it has to be a little bit intense, but to really nurture and nourish your nervous system in your body on this path. Because it was a lot to move through all of this, and I know my soul chose it in this intensity. It was the same time I discovered so many dynamics in my family, and for a period of time I had to cut contact with my mother and my grandfather. A year later we found peace again. I wouldn't say we're close, I don't think that's ever gonna happen, but I was able to accept them and not expect anything from them anymore, which has cleared the field for neutrality. That's what it feels like. So yeah, that was my journey. And in that year, everything except Morea fell away. So I was holding on to this idea of home in Morea, like my life depends on it, because it really felt like that. And like I shared, my health went downhill. I thought I'm gonna die. My family collapsed. My friends disappeared. It was like a whole glitch of everyone again disappearing in my life when I needed them the most. And then I got the message of my soul, burn everything to the ground. This was 2.5 years ago. So to become full circle, in these 2.5 years, I have really managed to, through a lot of trial and error, to live a soul-led life in alignment with my human needs. And I think that's really the art and my core message of this episode, to invite you to have the courage to follow your soul. But first of all, I cannot recommend to do this alone. If I look back, I really would have needed women on this journey that I met along the way, but oh my God, it would have been so much easier if there was someone who could understand me and see me and support me and hold me, and just the feeling that I'm not the only person going through this, because it felt like it. And an art of calling my energy back to me, to not constantly be overwhelmed and overstimulated the second I leave the house, to enjoy this life, even as this highly empathetic, sensitive, intuitive being that you might be as well if you've been listening until now. And then it just came to me. I was like, it's all coming back, but in a different way, from a different frequency, from a more grounded place, from a place where I can very honestly say there's rarely things when friends are moving through things that I haven't experienced myself, where I have refined my leadership, where I have refined my purpose, who I'm speaking to, where I'm really clear who the women are that I saw in my vision, where we're standing shoulder to shoulder in front of the earth and lifting the blanket of light on top of the earth. That it's really time for us to unite, to not walk this path alone anymore. I'm really clear on what I'm meant to create next. So after a long period of pause, I am being called to create the Soul Nectar Temple, which is a community space for women like you and me, where we can share our magic, where we can be seen and held, where we can bring our softness, where we don't get overwhelmed by constantly emotional dumping from people. It's a place where soul-led women like us share their soul nectar. It's a community where we meet once a month online, and where we have a solid WhatsApp community where you can always share your journey, your insights, your magic, where you can ask for guidance, where you can be seen and held in your softness, in your leadership, in becoming the woman you are meant to become in this lifetime to help this planetary shift in a very grounded, safe place. And yeah, that's the main message that I wanted to share with you today. I'm excited to see where Soul Nectar is going to lead, what's going to happen, what kind of women are coming into the field. And yeah, to wrap this up, I really want to encourage you to feel into yourself in which areas of your life you are living from your human and which areas you're living from your soul, and where you're already bridging the two. Because sometimes they can feel like different entities. It's like your soul wants this and your human needs this. For me, it always felt like my human is like this free, wild energy that just wants to travel and to activate people and like really be moving a lot. And my human would much rather have a temple with 10 cats and not leave the house all day. So I need to nourish both. And the way it has worked for me is to, because I've been a backpacker since forever. Traveling has been my number one priority. But I can't travel like this anymore. It's not sustainable. It drains my energy, my nervous system. I need beauty and clean spaces. It's such my home is not just a home, it's a temple space where I become, where I unwind, where I integrate. So this is like my way of traveling, is to be in a place where my soul wants to be for a few months, and to get a really beautiful place that I turn into a temple, that I decorate and upgrade and really anchor my frequency, where I can bring women to adorn, where I can bring women to share, and then let it all go again. So this has been my path for the last few years, to find beautiful temples, or they find me, and then to let it all go again, to create beauty and to let it go, and to trust that I am a steward for life. I'm a steward for beauty. I'm a steward for magical things. I create magical things, but I'm not meant to keep and hoard them all. I'm meant to steward them and then trust that they find a new steward. And I always find magical women who are so happy to keep the things that I create. And this looks different for every single one of you. So my invitation is to tune in after this episode to see what's landing, what ripples, where are you living, and you know it in your being. Where are you living more from your fear, from your routine, where you may be too comfortable in your comfort zone, and where do you live too much from your soul and it's actually exhausting your human? Where can you find the balance between the two? And I would love to know. Send me a message, and if you'd like to be part of this community, Soul Nectar Temple, send me a private message and I share my info about it.